Welcome to 912 News. My name is Sully Grasso. I'm the photographer and videographer. PTSD, post-traumatic syndrome disorder. This is a disorder that's associated mainly with many of our combat veterans coming back from Afghanistan. I have a great video that will explain and go into great detail with three guests that experienced their own personal experiences with PTSD. And I hope you will watch the video and share it with all. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sheena Hutchison. Today we're talking PTSD and how we can do better to help support those with it. Joining me at the bar are former ICE agent Jason Piccolo, Army veteran Joe Biggs, and Coalition for a Strong America COO Stephanie Scruggs. To start off, we tackled the basics. What is PTSD? And here's how my guests broke it down. This is Happy Hour. Thank you all for joining me tonight to talk a little bit about PTSD. But before we dive in, can you tell me a little bit about yourselves and your background? Jason, we'll start with you.
Sure. I'm an almost 19-year federal law enforcement officer. I'm also a veteran of Operation Iraqi Freedom, where I was a infantry captain.
Okay, Stephanie.
So I'm the COO for the Coalition for a Strong America, and we tend to focus on issues that affect the American middle class. We do all the research and then bring the issues to Capitol Hill and to state capitals so that we can educate the people who make the decisions that can help the American public.
I'm a former U.S. Army veteran. I've been in Iraq, Afghanistan, and I am actually an investigative journalist as well. I've covered issues at the border, terrorism. I've been to the Ferguson riots and things like that, so I've gotten to see a lot of fun, crazy things over the years.
All right, well, thank you all for being here, and let's get started. So first off, what is PTSD?
So really there are two different types of PTSD. What we're kind of finding is kind of like autism. It's not all one thing, right? But it does all relate back to physical problems in the brain. So a rape victim who did not have his or her head beaten, it's a chemical change in the brain. And we know that the brain is able to change based on the input that it's given, right? We can literally rewire ourselves. But when you have an incident where you live through something horrific, you get all these chemicals in your brain. And if it, especially if it continues in an ongoing manner, it really changes your chemistry and the way you process information. So this is where you see PTSD from rape victims, or even just combat veterans who never had any kind of blast exposure or injury, but maybe were exposed to some of the really horrific things in war. The secondary kind, and this I would say is our bigger problem in the United States right now, is related to brain injury. So, it wasn't very long ago, just 18 years ago, that the VA said that PTSD was all baloney and that you guys were all just a bunch of pussies. You weren't as big and tough of men, right? You were coming home all sad. It's not really that. The difference is that our warfighters are now exposed to constant blast injuries. You get your bell rung, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean you got blood coming out of your ears and your nose, but you got your bell rung. What that is it's a small concussion, right? What we know from science is that a concussion will heal if you take care of yourself and get the proper rest, nutrition, and water within anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months. The problem is, though, if you get another small concussion within that time, you might as well have been hit upside the head with a baseball bat, because it creates an even bigger problem and it exacerbates it, right? So we use C4, we have IUDs, you guys are constantly being hit with blasts of air and energy. Our brains aren't made up to do that. So what happens in the brain is kind of similar to a car accident or a football player. It does this in your head. So the blast hits you here, your initial impact is here, and then your brain goes right back to the back of your head. You get a second one there. It's really like having two concussions almost, right? And then the more you do that, if you're a door kicker, if you're laying charges or whatever, you're getting constant impacts. And the medics don't often recognize it. None of the medical personnel, even back at Walter Reed for a long time, didn't recognize it, because you're coming back. You've got your arms, you've got your legs and everything like that, and you've got this brain injury going on. So what is happening is that it's the exact same syndrome in many cases that the NFL players are going through from repeated concussions. What we're seeing coming out of the sandbox right now, especially given 10, 15 years later, we're seeing exponentially higher rates of Parkinson's disease and epilepsy coming out of our war fighters. And the unfortunate thing is, number one, their initial injuries weren't recognized, and then number two, the VA and their family members don't recognize the early signs of some of these things, and so they're not getting treatment in time, and they're winding up with very serious brain damage that could be helped, and then of course it starts rolling, and you wind up like that.
Right, Stephanie, we've talked a bit about veterans and in terms of what it means for PTSD, but it also applies to law enforcement officers.
LEOs also have PTSD. They just get it from a different aspect. They're not getting the traumatic brain injuries. They're not getting the PTSD from war or combat. They're getting it from what they see every day. It could be that dead child on the road. It could be conducting a child porn investigation, seeing the horrors that are really out there. So yeah, LEOs are getting it just as much as, I would say, as the wartime folks as well.
And it's similar. It still relates back to brain. It's not, like you're not crazy or anything like that. It's just that your brain is constantly flooded with these chemicals, right? For a fight or flight situation and horrific situations, and it literally rewires the brain of the person experiencing.
And the interesting thing about it is we constantly want to treat that with drugs.
Right.
And
Which make it worse.
It makes it 10 times worse. I mean, I don't know how much time we have here, but I could go into numerous times where I was on the verge of literally blowing my head off. I mean, out of control, in tears, and I would just flip out of nowhere. I mean, it literally took this epiphany, this moment in my life to realize it wasn't me, that it was these extra drugs and things like that. And, and after being blown up, I get put back out there in Afghanistan again, and then you get blown up again, and then you go back out there again. And I mean, that's your job. That's what you do. You're not complaining about it. You go and you go and you go. But you don't understand the ramifications of that non-stop having your head beaten around, being in rollovers, the concussion of an explosion going on nearby, and how that adds up. And then you get back and they're like, well, take this pill, take this pill, take this pill. And it just makes you even more out of control crazy. And you're constantly thinking about the things you've gone through, how that affects you. And if you're alone, then you have to add that to it. And then you start drinking and you're overcompensating for the pills, and you're adding the alcohol on top of it, and you can't sleep, and it's just this perfect storm for a nightmare. And at the end of the day, all we had to do was just get to the root of the problem and understand what we had to do, like you said, drinking water and taking time to actually heal from it. That can do a lot.
Absolutely.
But we're not doing it, and I don't see it anywhere.
Well, and part of the problem too is the machismo of what you guys do, whether you're an LEO or whether you're a warfighter, right? These guys come back, and because there's not a lot of communication and there's not a lot of information, and the wives and the mothers don't understand, the guys come back going, man, there's something really screwed up with me. It's my fault, and that continues and exacerbates that cycle.
You both hit it on the head. Both of you mentioned the word crazy. Now, PTSD comes with a stigma. Now, if you're in law enforcement, you're in military, you're machismo, like you said, who wants to get help if people are going to think you're crazy? And especially in law enforcement, what's the first thing you're going to think? You're going to think, I'm going to lose my badge, I'm going to lose my livelihood, people are going to think I'm crazy, what more do I have left to do? Boom.
So the number one thing that I often hear, because we work in the veteran community so much, is that guys don't want to give up their guns, right? Number one, they don't want to admit to their buddies. Number two, going to things like the American Legion and things like that, that's for the old guys. And some of those old guys who called them pussies for having PTSD and not manning up. But the other most common thing is, I don't want to give up my guns and my protection and things like that, so they don't seek help.
Well, even when you're still in, though, your command says they have an open door policy. And I've seen time and time again soldiers go up and go, excuse me, sir, I'm having issues. It's affecting my marriage. I'm having violent outbursts. And they go, whoa. We need to take you over here. You need to go, see this psychiatrist. And the psychiatrist goes, well, this person's not fit for duty. They're crazy. So people get scared. And then they bottle up and they self-medicate. And then once again, we go down that road where instead of just doing the right thing and talking to the person, going, all right, let's help you out. Let's go ahead and say, maybe let's keep you away from explosions for a while and let's let you get the rest you need. It's just like, this guy's a loser. You know, and this kid goes home and he's popping those pills and drinking and drinking and drinking. And next thing you know, DUIs or spousal abuse or something like that happens when it can all have been fixed at the root of a problem, sitting there going, hey, let's really talk about this. We've got to get past this whole thing of just medicate. I mean, I went to the VA for the first time in Austin, didn't even get to be seen by a doctor. A nurse came in, took my, vitals and all that a few weeks later, and I went in there for my back and had some back issues. They sent in pain pills. No doctor even saw me.
They just show up in the mail.
Yeah.
Well, you remember?
And then I'm sitting here like, you know, I've got these issues going on, but you guys want to continue to just drug and never really talk about it.
Right, you remember coming back from the war and they give you a questionnaire, and the questionnaire is like, hey, it was like maybe 5 or 6 questions. One of them, do you feel the suicidal thoughts? You want at that point, you just want to get home, you want to get out of demobilization? No, because if you hit yes, that's going to trigger a whole bunch of things, and your command is not going to want to deal with that. Now think about that from an LEO side. What are they doing? Who are they going to go to? Their command's going to be like, hey, dude, deal with that on your own time. You're here to work for us. It's 8 to 10 hours, 3 days a week.
And so what you see from both camps is that you see self-medication start up, right? In many cases, it's to counteract the effects of the opiates, and LEOs and things like that, where there's not necessarily opiates for pain, it's drinking to make yourself forget, or at least that's what they tell themselves, make yourself forget. It's one of the worst possible things you can do for PTSD, whether it's blast associated or experience associated, because binge drinking actually shrinks your brain, that thing that needs to recover, and if it doesn't have the fluids that you need, then your brain can't heal itself. And it's an unfortunate, it's just making things worse and worse and sending guys into a spiral.
And you have people going on these rapid deployments, then they come back and PCS and go to another unit. Yeah. Now you've got a guy who's created this brotherhood and been through all these experiences with this one family, then they put him on the other side of the country. Like what happened to me, I was at Bragg from 2003 to 2009, and then they go, all right, I come back from Afghanistan, all right, you're going to El Paso, and here I am with this whole other group of people that have this bond, and here I am, I'm kind of like, I'm all alone, I don't know these people, and you might as well just put me in a crowded room, like or at Walmart or something, or at a theme park, and just let me loose. I'm going to not be comfortable, I'm going to wig out there. Right. And that's what happens because, you know, yeah, you've been through my experience, but you weren't there with me. You didn't see what happened to my buddy. And that's different. And,
you lost your support system.
Yeah, you need that bond.
Then you're there alone.
Yeah, you need someone to talk to. I think, you know, when it comes down to how do you heal it besides medication, you need someone to talk to. It could be and 9 times out of 10 you go to a counselor. You might not gel with them, but you can gel with a brother or sister, someone that's been through those shared experiences.
Right, and you kind of, there's more of that sense of security or brotherhood, and you know that it's not going to escalate into losing your guns or losing your job, or just
that, and just the comfort of knowing that you're not a freak. Right? There's a reason why, I don't care what war you were in, right? Anytime you see mill guys and they see another mill guy, maybe it's different war, maybe different, a different branch of the government, put those guys off in a room. They're going to peel off and talk all night if they've never met each other before, because, hey, okay, I've got a battle buddy again. I've got somebody who understands what I went through. And if we can elevate those discussions, not just to talk about, experiences in the field, but this is what I'm going through now. How do I deal with this? And I think that, things like the VFW and American Legion were initially set up to do those things, but guys of our generation have had a really hard time going there because, they don't feel like they're old enough or welcome. There's a bad perception issue. The American Legion's doing a lot of good things to change that, but you guys, the more guys that you talk to about their experiences, and same is true with LEOs too, put a couple ex-cops in the room, they're going to talk all night. Find those connections so that you can talk about what's going on with you and realize that you are not alone in this. You are not a freak. It's an injury no different than, nobody give you shit if you got your arm blown off, right? Because then you're a disabled veteran. But for some, or a cop, if you got shot as a cop, but for some reason, we don't talk enough about the invisible injuries in the brain that are creating the exact same physiological effect.
Army veteran Joe Biggs also shares his personal experience with PTSD. Here's his journey.
Another huge issue too when you come back is, all right, I'm going through this and I already feel like I'm alone, because everyone that goes through that, they feel like they're alone. That's kind of like one of the things that happens, which is really weird because so many of us are going through it, but for some reason we all have this one, factor is that we all feel like we're going through it by ourselves. And then when you get home and you're dealing with it and you're frustrated and you're angry, the family doesn't really quite know what's going on. They think it's them. Those turn into arguments. Those arguments turn into divorce or whatever, or out of control or separation, and it makes it even worse and worse and worse. And then they add more pills because in the military finds out, hey, we're having troubles at home. Let's give you this, prescription. Let's give you that over there. And it's so crazy that it just continues and continues and continues. It's a horrible thing. I mean, I'll tell you a story. I was in El Paso one night, and I had just PCS from Fort Bragg, and I got there, and I don't know what happened. I had went out with my roommate at the time, And I'm sitting in this bar, and there's beautiful women everywhere, and all these people, and they're all having fun and hanging out. And I just started tearing up for some reason, and I just started like tensing up like that, and I didn't know what was going on, and I started breathing heavy, and I was basically having a panic attack. And I go, I gotta get the hell out of here. And I get in my car, and I start driving, and it's like 1 in the morning, and I'm speeding down Zaragoza in El Paso. And I come to a red light, and I just start screaming. And I don't know why, I've just been taken over. I'm punching the roof of my car. I hit my steering wheel, the airbag goes off. And, you know, I end up going home and try to take all these pills and kill myself. I flipped out, couldn't do it anymore. And I'm sitting there, and this girl that I haven't talked to in years has this bad feeling. She calls me, and I'm in the back. I've been chugging tequila, and I'm just waiting to die because I'm just done dealing with this.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, fire department shows up. They take me to the hospital, pump my stomach or whatever, and my chain of command comes in, and they go, "You try to kill yourself?" And I'm like, "No, I just took too many sleeping pills, and I was drinking, and, you know, this and that happened." Oh, okay, cool. You know, but...
And they let it go?
Yeah. And it was just all these signs. Like, I had from 2009 up until about 2014, I was bad.
Wow.
And it literally took me one day in the bathroom screaming and yelling at myself. And I remember throwing my hands down on the table in my bathroom, and I knock over all these pills, and I hear the and I look over to my right, and I go, it's not me. Because I'm good, I'm a nice guy, but it really didn't start until a lot of this other stuff. And I remember I took all those pills and flushed them down the toilet, and I haven't had one of those outbursts. I haven't been angry. I haven't wanted to put a gun in my mouth. I haven't wanted to do anything like that since then. And it saved my life to have that epiphany and that realization that, you know, yeah, I've got issues, but that's not helping me. And doing all this other stuff, you know, massages and chiropractors and acupuncture or smoking weed or something like that. These things help because it's natural and that's okay, but that's not helping.
You know, and I'm glad you brought that up because the Israeli military has been treating PTSD and brain injury for a couple decades now with cannabis. And the reason why is, and the US government, I kid you not, has a patent on marijuana to be used for brain injury situations, for Alzheimer's, for epilepsy, and for Parkinson's, all brain injury. The reason why it works is because you have myelin sheaths. It's like the connection in your nerves in your brains. And a myelin sheath is, think of an electrical cord on a lamp, right? You know how it has that plastic cord on it? If you peel that cord away, you've got the wires and they spark and they go crazy, right? Sometimes it's nerve pain, sometimes it's stuff in your brain. What the Israeli military found and the Israeli government found, using United States taxpayer funding for the last 50 years, by the way, is that cannabis actually rebuilds the myelin sheath around that. It protects it, number one, and then it helps to rebuild it. Whereas opiates and the other things that they're giving guys, like barbiturates to control epilepsy and things like that, they tear away that sheath, right? So it's putting a Band-Aid in the figurative sense on things, but also think about slapping a bunch of Band-Aids on a sensitive area. Yeah. Then stuff can't get rebuilt because you got all this glue hogging it up, and that's really what all the drugs that the VA is throwing at you guys is winding up doing. It's making the situation worse because it's not creating an atmosphere where the brain can heal itself, and it's actually damaging.
It's preventing the healing process.
Right.
So getting back to your story, that's a 5-year span of time.
Yeah, there was numerous times I might not even be here today. I've had guns in my mouth. I remember one time I grabbed a gun and walked off in the woods, and that was it. I was like, I'm done, because I would just keep having these mental breakdowns, and I was like, this isn't me, and I don't want to be this kind of person because I lost all my friends. I was having angry, violent outbursts, and then I got to where people, like my roommate, wanted to move off, and I had to find another roommate, and people didn't want to be around me, and I was like, I don't like who I've become. And, you know, like I said, it took really looking in the mirror, figuratively and, you know, literally at myself and going, you know, all right, what's going on? What are the issues? Why is this happening? And what's making it worse? And I realized really quickly it was those pills that made it worse. And if I would have done that, I probably wouldn't be here today. I can definitely tell you that.
After tackling the basics, we talk about what vets and civilians can do to recognize the signs and symptoms.
Before that experience, it's going to be hard to tell, because if you've just met this person after they're out of the military and they're going through this, it's going to be hard for you to really, in my opinion, I think, really be able to differentiate between normal Joe, how he was happy and, you know, funny all the time, to more reserved and a little bit snappy and angry and on edge Joe, you know. So you would just think that that's how I am. But it's good to have family that's a little bit more educated and understand, and the friends that have been
You
around.
hit the nail on the head right there, education. Now, we have the social media all the time. We have the 22 push-ups, the 22 seconds, 22 this, 22 that, but nobody actually addresses the actual, why are we doing this? Maybe we should have more of an optics that, hey, you know what? You need to recognize these signs. Are they irritable? Are they backing off? Are they drinking a ton? Are they medicated? Do they just seem like they have no purpose in life? So you really need to have that kind of measures out there rather than, hey, if you want more information, go to this website. If you want this, call this number. Who's going to call these 800 numbers?
Yeah.
Your social media, your social everything, your network is going to be the ones that are going to be the first responders.
And I would also say, too, to the wives and girlfriends or family members, whether they're those who knew your personality before or after, there are medical things that you can look for, especially as it relates to looking at the more serious things. You guys heard me mention the exponential rates of epilepsy and Parkinson in our Sandbox veterans coming back, right? So with epilepsy, there are several different kinds of seizures. When people hear seizure or epilepsy, they think somebody falls down on the floor and flops like a fish, right? It doesn't generally start that way, right? Maybe in a severe blast injury, but usually it starts with something called absent seizures. And this happens really common, and I worry about this because if you catch it early, you can start fixing it. So what happens is people just space out and they literally lose time. They don't go into amnesia like you would if you had a full,
Well, that happened.
but you space out and you lose time.
Yeah.
That's a form of epilepsy. It's called an absent seizure. And so if you're a wife or a family member, or a husband or a coworker, and you notice that the veteran or LEO or whoever that you're dealing with is just kind of looks like he's daydreaming or checks out mentally for a little bit, that's a really good sign. And start making note of those and keeping track of it. Make sure that you talk to the doctor about it. On the Parkinson's side, right, we've all seen Michael J. Fox. We know, how he moves, and that's kind of our only relationship to that. So Parkinson's can start in main ways too. In my uncle, for instance, he started losing his voice constantly, and it was an interesting thing. And his Parkinson's started in his vocal cords. He can now no longer speak, unfortunately. So a common one is getting hoarse and losing your voice. Not that, if you're going to a concert screaming, that's one thing. But if there's no, you're hydrated and everything. But another one is little twitches, and it's hard to show on camera. But, I know guys that, their pinky just starts, right? Or maybe it's just one little teeny muscle up here that you'd never use and you can't control on your own. Little muscle twitches like that can also, and I'm not saying in both of these cases that those are always what that is, but they are little signs that family members and coworkers should be looking for, documenting, and talking to the doctor about. That's when we need to, if they start repeating and happening more often or getting more severe, you need to get in and get an MRI done, an EEG done, and really take a look at what's going on in that brain to see if there's scar tissue in the brain or various different injuries. And for a lot of guys who had no idea that they had a concussion, when you get that picture inside the brain and you start seeing lesions on the brain that haven't healed yet because they haven't been taken care of.
One thing that I wanted to bring up was that a lot of LEOs retire, and then you hear like a year later, 2 years later, they kill themselves. Now, one of the big things is they lose that brotherhood, they lose that sisterhood. So the people they would actually reach out for the support network aren't there. So then, even if people are still on active duty, the LEOs that are still going to work every day, you hear about a law enforcement officer committing suicide in a parking lot. People think, hey, you know what, maybe he's having a rough time in life, maybe it's his wife, maybe it's his sister, cousin, whoever, is making them drive themselves to that point. But do they ever think and take a look back and say, hey, maybe that's PTSD? Maybe there's something going on there that we could recognize and we could help them before they end up killing themselves in a parking lot of a police station or a barracks.
And it's not like you guys have an American Legion Hall down the road that you can go have a beer and swap stories with buddies and work your stuff out, right?
No.
You're just done with the force. You're done.
Yeah, you're done. You lose, and they call it the thin blue line is there for a reason. And I see it a lot more coming out now. You'll see thin blue line, everything. Now, you didn't have this before. Police attrition has been going crazy. Well, what I feel is happening now is you're having LEOs, either Fed, local, state, whatever, coming together to form a bigger bond, a bigger brotherhood, a bigger sisterhood, in order to support each other. So you're starting to see thin blue line. I even have friends that aren't even in LEOs that are popping up with thin blue line. A lot of people are supporting that effort, and that's another way you can start recognizing that, hey, maybe we need to take a look at the PTSD happening within our ranks.
So you mentioned law enforcement officers when they retire and they lose that support system, and they might not have the family or the friends to talk to, taking desperate measures because they're so ill. How does, with the Ferguson riots and the Black Lives Matter and the general de-policing political sentiments, or even like the anti-military ones, how does that impact, or can that impact, like our veterans or our law enforcement?
It's got to be insane, because you're looking at this rise in social media, and what you're seeing with the police officers is you're seeing someone taking a video from an incident, and they're saying this person had their hands up or whatever, this person was attacked by the cops for no reason, and we need to go out here and riot. Which, like you said, then a lot of law enforcement are like, I don't want to join, or a lot of people are like, I don't want to join and be an LEO at all, because you're going to go to jail for this stuff. But then you have to wait, weeks, months down the road, and body cam footage comes out, and, the cops are doing the right thing, but that cop's name's been dragged through the media, and with the PTSD, and then their name being plastered on social media, and this guy's a racist, this guy's a bigot, he's sexist, he did this and that. He's just a bully, and that adds on to it. I mean, I couldn't imagine being a cop within the last 5 years. I mean, I think that would be the most insane job right now, because they are just getting drugged through everything right now and blamed for everything.
But there are some organizations that are utilizing social media to counter these things, right? So 2 really great ones. One is the Law Enforcement Action Network. I mean, we've got resources for the vets, but not as many, it seems like. So Law Enforcement Action Network is largely social media based, and they do spend time on the Hill fighting for various sworn officers' rights, just not TSA. Sorry, TSA. But, FBI and police officers and sheriffs and this stuff. And another one is the Law Enforcement Legal Defense Fund, which actually winds up paying for the defense and the attorneys, quality attorneys for law enforcement officers that are stuck in those type of situations. They're just great organizations, and if you're looking for a community, right, there is one online in these 2 organizations for law enforcement to find. Now, if we can take that, to the public and start getting those things. But I think that outside of that, outside of the social media, we have to educate the culture so that when we see our law enforcement officers struggling, when we see our military veterans struggling, we don't shun them. We don't call them crazy. We don't call them jerks or isolate them even further than they already are.
Well, that's one thing I want to bring up is the island you get put on. You mentioned it before. A lot of times your chain of command will put you off, say, oh, PTSD, put that guy over there. Law enforcement. What we're seeing now is every time you have someone jumping on social media saying, this policeman did this, this policeman did that, they should go to jail. A lot of times with a supportive chain of command, what you're doing is the next day that chain of command is releasing the full body cam, the full transcripts of everything going on. So what they're doing is they're supporting their officer. Now, if you had that same support in the military, maybe you could catch those, those symptoms, those signs before it gets to the point where they don't feel like they're left off on this PTSD island.
Well, a lot of things you see in the military too, though, like you said earlier, brought up crazy. People associate military with PTSD, which automatically means crazy. They got a few screws loose and things like that. And yeah, like I said, I've had my issues, but I've learned to deal with stuff like that, and with good support, with good friends and family, and talk and things like that. You're not a liability. Not everyone goes through those types of things. My buddy Tim Kennedy swears up and down he doesn't have any issues with anything. And I know a lot of other friends who don't, some who do, but they want to paint all military that way, and they want to say that everyone's going through that, and they're all going to snap, and they're all going to have that issue. That's just horrible that we would even treat our men and women that way who've served for the country, instead of going, you know what, this is an issue, this is how we get to the root of the problem, this is how we fix it, and this is how we stand behind our men and women and give them the support we need. Give them a good job. They have leadership skills, they have all this stuff, they have the ability to multitask and to break down things without being stressed out super easily. Give them that motivation, give them that drive and that sense of brotherhood. You brought that soldier back into an environment where he feels like he's needed. Because when a lot of us get out of the military, we feel like we've lost that sense of brotherhood, that desire, that push, that need to achieve a goal. and wake up and when you're in the military, I know I've got first formation at this time and COBs at this time, and in the middle I've got to be in the motor pool, I've got a field exercise, I got to take my soldiers to the range, and you're always doing something.
Yeah.
And that keeps you so busy that you're not thinking about, this is what I did in Iraq, this is what I did in Afghanistan, my buddy died this way or that.
And I think that here's where the VA and the government can help. Usually too much government's a bad thing, but I think that the government needs to take a look at the GI Bill and change it, okay? Because another thing that happens is you guys have these great benefits that a ridiculously low number of guys take advantage of. Because you've already been there, done that. On an experience level, you're light years ahead of your average 18-year-old idiot freshman in college. So you go through this back to a bunch of 18-year-old snowflakes that like literally just crawled out from underneath mommy's skirt. You're not going to stay in college for that, right? And so guys either don't take it or they drop out. What we should be doing instead, in my personal opinion, is looking at, there have been some bills in Congress that haven't gotten a lot of legs, but instead of taking your GI Bill and getting a 4-year degree that you may or may not use, give that money to apprenticeship programs, which they do in some measures depending on the program. But also, what about the guys who have experience and have an idea for a small business? This is America, for crying out loud, right? We believe in small business and the capitalistic ideal. If you took that money that you would have spent on your GI Bill, 30, 60, 90, $120,000, and put that towards a business, because what we find is that, first of all, hiring a veteran is the best thing you can ever do, because I love working with them because you know it's going to get done. You don't have to ask questions. It'll get done, and it'll get done early, right? So it's perfect for the entrepreneurial spirit. The other thing about being self-employed, though, that's great for veterans is, like, if you're clocking into a desk job, you're 9 to 5, and you're up at 3 o'clock in the morning because you woke up with the shakes, it's going to blow your whole day. So what we find is that guys who are self-employed, that maybe they're farming, maybe they're working in tech, they get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and they have something to do in their office. They have a new mission, so they can deal with their PTSD. I got the shakes, I'm gonna go do something with my hands, I'm gonna go build something, I'm gonna fix something, and it's a new mission.
Yeah, I went and got certified in welding.
Nice.
And I would go out to the shop and weld and build art pieces and do all that and just keep your mind busy. So definitely those kind of schools are good.
Yeah.
And because we can't talk about veterans' health without talking about the VA, here are the main problem areas that we came up with.
Well, you can go to the VA website and you can look at it and your eyes will glaze over because you don't know where to look.
They send you documents and pages and you're just like, yeah. For the veteran going through, PTSD and all that, I mean, it looks like this never-ending nightmare when they send you this stuff, stacks of paper, and you're like, man, can it get any worse? You're already down in the slumps, and then they give you that, and like, it'll be good, just fill all this out, and you can come to like 55 appointments over the next, month or so. I'm like, man, I got a life too. I can't.
You thought you were done with that much paperwork after you signed up for the Army, right?
I mean, I'm so much at a point with the VA, I'm fed up. I don't even want to go anymore.
Well, you're lucky to get an appointment a month out, let alone 55 within a reasonable time frame because of the backup.
And try going to college. You're going to, we're not even talking, God forbid you want to try a small business, but just to go to college, you have to fill out 50 paperworks. You got to get a hold of 3 different people. Now, what if you do? They do have ways you can start a small business, but can you imagine trying to dig through that paperwork and then try to get the funding and try to get anything going with that? There has to be a simpler solution. Sources to do that. They're throwing money at it, but they're not throwing the right money and the right people out there. You can't just hire someone to say, hey, you know what, check this block and you're going to get this. You need someone that actually knows how to do the process in the VA to help that veteran.
Yeah, that's a big thing, is you have a lot of people who haven't been through this process so far anyways. They're like, well, here's this paperwork. Well, what do I need to do? I don't know. There's instructions on the paperwork. And I'm like, wait, you haven't gone through this yourself? Like, aren't you a veteran? No, I got a degree in liberal arts or something. Like,
but even the VA's website itself is a mess. It's like, trying to be a rat in a maze chasing a piece of cheese that is buried under 2 tons of sand. The amount of pages you have to click through, you can't find anything. And of course, go figure, government. What has government done well in history ever?
And God forbid you have to call like the 1-800 number to try and figure out information.
Trying to log on to the system, it crashes every 3 days. days, you know, and then you have to have a password that's 50 sentences long. It's crazy.
Well, since I've been out, I've lived in 3 different places. When I got out, I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina. I had to join the VA system there. There are 4 different places now. So I joined the VA in Charlotte. Then I ended up moving down into South Carolina and I had to join the one in Rock Hill, South Carolina, because I was going to welding school. And then there's this whole process of moving this stuff. You know, when you're in the Army, you have one of those cards with a chip on it, and you just put it in the computer and they have all your stuff. And now it's like there's just paper, and you have to wait on someone to mail this to there. And then you have to go through this because this doctor, for some reason, can't email to them that you've already had this check. So you have to go through all these things again, and that adds to your stress, and that adds to everything that you're going through on top of your PTSD, your medications you're taking. And then you move to Austin, Texas, and they go, we need you to do this. And I go, I just did that a few days ago before I left. I don't know you, so we're going to do it again. Come back in 3 months, you know, and you're like, whoa.
In this day and age of technology, that is absolutely unacceptable.
Insane.
There's no excuse.
Any company in the private sector that behaved this way would, number 1, go out of business faster than you can say boo, and number 2, the heads of the company would all be prosecuted for fraud and malfeasance, right?
And we're not talking just about the hospitals either. We're talking about the whole education system.
Exactly.
The GI Bill's not new. How long has it been around? Almost 70, 80 years now. So we're talking about a system that's been in place. It may have changed names here from the Montgomery to the post 9/11 to the GI Bill, but it's still the same mechanism.
And it's still being run the way it
It's
was
still
50
being
years
ran.
ago.
Mhm.
Internet, what's that? You
I know
Let me
exactly.
get my paper file.
Yeah, right. So, you know, I'm hopeful that this administration will take a look at bringing the entire VA, not just the hospital system, but the entire VA into the 21st century. Heck, I'd be happy if they got it into the latter half of the 20th century, because it's not there yet. But, you know, there's real world efficiency practices.
Well, we have these people they bring in, like some guy used to be a general and they want to make him in charge of some. He's so pulled away from that process. This
Yeah,
guy has already
Yes.
got his 100% or whatever. He's already done this and that. He's got his job, his money, he's good. He's so disassociated with what we are freshly coming out of. There needs to be like a panel of people. They need to bring in young veterans who are willing to sit there with the president, with the administration. You know, these are the problems we're seeing arise. This is what's happening to me. This is why this makes me not want to go to the VA. And they have this panel of people that can sit there and discuss all these issues, and they can go, wow, I didn't know that.
And the
how do we
government would
fix that?
save billions of dollars if they just made this more efficient.
Well, it's almost like they need more than anything is like a business audit.
Bingo.
To get the experts, it's like, you know.
So my husband
Even President Trump.
has been a very successful businessman over his whole lifetime. He's just smart with money, something I am, anyway. But his contention has always been that the best possible thing the United States government could do is bring in the most successful world executives and say, you have 2 years to fix this, and we will give you 10% of everything you save over $500 million. And when you're dealing with the budgets of the size and scope of the VA, that's a lot of money. And you're going to get these super intelligent empire building guys go in and fix this, fix this, fix this, fix this. The caveat would have to be is not only do you save money, that's not the most important thing. Make the system efficient so that we save money, not the other way around. And if we treated it like that from a business aspect, we would have something well-functioning, successful, and see our veterans get out and be able to take advantage of the services and be productive in society.
Yeah, there needs to be a way that I can scan a card and go, this is who I am, and then everything that I've gone through and logged in shows up, and they go, okay, we can see you, sir. You know, it shouldn't be, well, I need you to go take an MRI, you know, go get an MRI or CAT scan, or we need to x-ray that, and I need to have an evaluation on that. No, I've done this 30 times. And why don't we at the VA system have like a like an ER? Why doesn't that even set up? Why do I have to? I go to the VA. That's my only source right now for anything medical, really. Unless I have to go to like get shot or something, God forbid. I have to go to like a regular ER, and pay thousands of dollars. But why isn't there a way set up at the VA for me to go in and go, all right, I think I have the flu, or I'm having
Like an
something.
urgent care.
Yeah, an urgent care. They don't have that. And then you have soldiers literally killing themselves in the parking lot of these VAs, setting themselves on fire, shooting themselves in the head because they go to the VA and they go, I need help. Well, sir, we can't see you right now. You need to make an appointment. We have one available, though. What is it, August? We'll see you in January. Good luck, though. Here's a number to call.
Yeah.
And the guy goes, he just can't do it. It's
And then
sad.
the number
It's just-
is manned by some $10 an hour operator that's
Hello?
half asleep. Yeah. Can you help me? What is your issue? And it's wrong.
Now, we need ground truth. And I think, you're bringing up a lot of great points, and you brought up a great point about They're hiring these generals. They're hiring these people who have been at this 1,000-mile view for how many years of their career. They have a great title. Their resume probably looks awesome. But you know, you got a guy that's been in 10, 15 years. He knows the ground truth. Maybe he doesn't have the educational bona fides as some other person. Maybe he's not like a sergeant major. But maybe he is competent tactically and technically at this level, the ground truth, to actually go and fix the system. Maybe not just him. Maybe put together a panel.
That's
of
what I'm
people.
saying. Get those people together and have that conversation. And this general, this head of the VA or whatever goes, this is what people are bringing up. We're having these issues. Have you encountered this before? Oh yeah, this has happened to me a bunch. And I think this is a good way that you could fix it. And they could go, well, does anyone else think that's a good way? Yeah, we could do that. All right, well, let's try and implement that.
But I think you also need professionals, right? You don't hire a person whose entire lifetime has been in processing HR to go do the financial end and accounting for a company, right? So why would we take a general whose expertise is in
politics, basically.
not just politics, but breaking shit and killing people, right? And now we're going to give you this job where you've got to figure out how to help people deal with finance, deal with human resources, deal with medical. They have zero experience in that. Why would you do that?
You bring up a great point. Treat it like a battle. Treat it like a war. Infantry goes to war, but they also have a support network. Intelligence, logistics, you know, anything you can imagine. Say, okay, we have a problem. Here's the mission statement. Implement it. So just go down and you can have bureaucracy, but make sure you're putting the right people in the right place. Just because someone is a GS-15 or in a law enforcement, just because someone's a GS-15 in the federal government doesn't mean they're smart. It means they rose through the ranks. Maybe you need some GS-12s and 13s who know how to fix that system. Maybe you have your ex-senior NCOs. Maybe you have a private, but that dude knows what he's talking about, fixing each individual system, but not by themselves, but as an integrated team of experts. All HR people working together could work on HR, but if you put an HR guy with budget, with leadership, with management all together to fix those systems, that's when you can actually start implementing change.
To what extent, though, can this be done without the support of Congress? I mean, can it just be done, or do we need funding for it? Do we need authorizations? Like, how
you
does that
need
work?
managers. You have them already. You don't need
have. I mean, what happened to leaders in this world?
Yeah, that's what I mean.
have. I mean, even as far with law enforcement in some areas. And in the military, you have people in leadership positions, but you don't have people that actually know how to be leaders. And in order to be a leader, what do you have to do? To be a follower, you have to be that guy that's on the ground pounder, the guy who's going to the VA, the guy that's going to to these appointments, and you're actually there seeing it. You need leaders who still have that pulse of what's happening day to day in all these soldiers and officers' lives, and still has that ability to reach out and find out what's going on. And if that person gets to a point where they don't have that anymore, we'll bring in a younger guy or woman to go in and take over that position, and it still has that pulse of the people of what's happening. And I think that's a good way to get some kind of leadership in there. And then I think you pick a couple of VAs and you implement something like one of those urgent care things and see how that works. And when you get the feedback that, hey, this helped me out or it didn't, you know, then you can kind of move on and implement it based on that or not.
What's the biggest thing you have to do in a military, law enforcement, civilian world? You have to make a decision. And what's happening now is nobody's making a decision. They're all waiting on Congress. They're waiting on something. But you have people right now that can make decisions. They can implement change. Are we going to still have, you know, and this isn't, we could just say, hey, you know what, this isn't just a VA. We could talk VA all day long. But this is anywhere. You know, we shouldn't be having law enforcement officers kill themselves in parking lots. We shouldn't have vets out in a parking lot lighting themselves on fire. We need people that are going to make a change. They're going to notice each individual people that are having problems.
Yeah, we have people at the top that are bringing problems to the table, but they don't have any way to fix it. And that's something you learn in the military. You don't bring a problem to the table without having
a solution.
Without a solution. And having those younger people freshly out have those solutions and have those fresh ideas. And yeah, they're not the ones making the decisions, but they're going, this is what we've experienced, this is what we're seeing, this is what I believe would help me, and I'm sure some of these other people feel the same way. What can we do to maybe give this a shot?
And to answer your question, it's not just one thing, okay? This isn't something that 535 guys in Congress can solve. It's not something just the president can solve. It's not something just the Pentagon can solve. And it's not something culture can solve. What it's going to take is all of this. And I think a really good start to that is having discussions like this that hit the airwaves and can talk to the families. And forget about the families, talk to the general public about what it's like at the end of the day to be an LEO with PTSD, to be a soldier coming back from the war, and the things that you're experiencing, and then talk about what can help and start listening to each other on what helps you. Is it working with your hands? Is it, there's even, new therapies coming out showing that regular drum beats, you ever notice that a lot of the Joes coming back start getting into really heavy bass-led music?
I listen to like death metal and stuff like that. That actually calms me.
There's a physiological reason for that. So they have found, and the drummer from the Grateful Dead, no kidding, is actually on tour right now doing this. They have found that heavy bass rhythmic patterns in male brains actually make the mylar sheath. Remember going back to the mylar sheath? Makes it thicker, right? So it helps to heal your brain. So I think you guys are instinctively working on healing yourselves without recognizing it. It's really kind of fascinating stuff, right? So yeah, turn it up.
What are you doing?
But it's,
I'm healing myself.
But it's all of these kinds of things. And then we've also got to have Congress pass the laws to let you have a choice of what to do with your GI Bill. You need a president that's always going to support the troops and not screw around on the rules of engagement, leaving you guys in limbo all the time. You need a culture in media that's not going to call officers baby killers all the time. And, the funniest thing I've seen in like a year has been a bunch of spoiled white middle-class kids screaming, "Down with white supremacy," at a bunch of black and Hispanic cops protecting a white woman. It's like, really? But this is the culture that we're in now, right? And so we've got to start countering that in the show. And not that I'm blowing smoke up your skirt, but this show is an important step in changing that culture and getting people to talk about the issues that the people who protect us, whether domestically or abroad, are going through every single day.
Well, the other thing too is there is no silver bullet that's going to solve this overnight. You need to start open discussion, but the other thing is there is no quick fix. There isn't, hey, you know what, 22 a day, cool, great slogan, we're going to fix it because of that. No, you need to really sit down and develop a plan and make decisions.
So, what encouragement would you give to a soldier, a police officer, anybody else suffering PTSD, or a loved one of that person?
Talk, conversation. Have a really good conversation.
I would say for the spouses, mainly wives, but for the spouses of our veterans coming back, patience. Number one, patience. Read about PTSD. Read about so you can understand what is happening with your spouse and your husband, and start looking for those signs. Are they spacing out a little bit? Are there funny muscle twitches going on that you don't recognize? Start just reading up on these things, and then talk to your spouse and get them into a doctor so that they can check their brains and get the treatment they really need.
What he said is pretty much the most important thing, is learning to talk, learning to open up, and find that support channel that you have, whether it be friends, family. And even if they don't understand you, it's good to just talk about it because it's a weight off your shoulders. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of soldiers in LEO learn to open up about these experiences and to talk about them. It makes it easier to kind of digest what's happening. And then those people might have ideas to kind of help steer in the right direction to get the help you need.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much for joining me at the bar today.
Salute.
Cheers. Salud.